Thank you very much for attending the Winter Pacific Seminar. We'll begin the opening service and chant Jusege.
Namanda, 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 namanda. 강원 조생안 이심은 연호 징앙흠만속 세이훈 요쇼악 가오문요고 부이다이세슈 부사이쇼밍의 세이훈 요쇼악 가시조붓노 묘쇼조니포 극교미쇼몬 세이훈요쇼악 리옥지쇼넨 조에슈몽요 징음은요노 이쇼테니시 진리키헨다이고 부쇼무사이노 쇼조상금요 고사이슈야그남 가이히지행엔 메시곤모함 헤이소크쇼와그노 스낫 젠슈몬 고소조 만족 이요로니포 니칭앗 슈주기 텐코혼풍엠 이슈가이호소 고세크노크호 조혼다이슈주 세포시시금 그요히사이붓 그속슈토크홈 간네시조맘 도크이상가요 뇨붓무게치 쯔낫미후쇼 강가크헤릭 도시사이쇼솜 싱안야코가 나이센호간도 고크쇼텐닌 도진묘개 간니시크도크 묘노세이사이 노호տն모나히신 온조 안하고 나만다 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 나만다
Good morning, everyone. 皆様おはようございます。I'd like to welcome all of you to the 2024 Winter Pacific Seminar, sponsored by the BCA Center for Buddhist Education and hosted by District Ministers Association, Buddhist Education Committee, and the Gardena Buddhist Church. At this time, I'd like to call upon the Reverend Jerry Hirano, the Director of BCA Center for Buddhist Education, for the greetings and the introduction of the guest minister.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the BCA CBE Pacific Seminar. First of all, I want to thank the Gardena Buddhist Temple for hosting us here, and the Southern District's Ministers Association for doing so much work for this, especially Reverend Ko Takata, who did all the arrangements for us. And of course, our guest speaker, Reverend Dr. Ken Tanaka. I have kind of a long thing for his introduction, so I'm not going to go through all of it because I think most of you know Reverend Tanaka. And we're fortunate that he's in the United States, said until March, so we were able to use him for today's talk. And specifically, today's talk, Buddhism and War. I picked this theme because our current world situation seems so crazy, and we're seeing the young people becoming very upset because of it. And I thought, wow, I'm old. Things are coming full circle. And the first person I thought of was Reverend Tanaka, because in the 70s, he started a program called Relevant American Buddhist, RAB. And the whole purpose for that program, I thought, was young people at that time were protesting for the civil rights, for the war in Vietnam, and they want to find a relevancy of their religion and what was going on in the world. And now we see this again with so many of our young people and even old people like myself. It's very confusing how we should approach our world being so chaotic. So Reverend Tanaka, I thought, would be a great speaker for this. So I'm going to just read a little bit that he is from the Mountain View Buddhist Temple. He graduated from Stanford with his BA in Cultural Anthropology. He specialized in the study of Buddhism at various institutions and included a stint as a Theravada monk in Thailand. Then as a graduate student at the IBS, then Tokyo University MA, and then UC Berkeley with his PhD. And he taught at IBS for 11 years and served as a minister at Southern Alameda County Buddhist Church for 3 years. Reverend Dr. Tanaka then went to Japan and was a professor at Musashino University there, and he retired 5 years ago as professor and director of the Institute of Buddhist Culture at Musashino University in Tokyo. Most of you know some of his books, and they've been very useful for us, I think, as a very practical guide in how Buddhism affects our lives. So I hope you will listen carefully to his talk today on Buddhism and war. All right, and thank you all for coming and supporting the CBE.
Thank you very much, Hirano Sensei. We now have a Dharma message by Bishop Marvin Harada. Bishop was unfortunately unable to join this morning due to a funeral service held in Central California, but he sent us a video forward. So please look at the screen. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this year's Winter Pacific Seminar 2024. My apologies that I cannot be there in person this year. It is an annual seminar that I have always found very meaningful. I very much wanted to hear Tanaka Sensei's message and thoughts on the topic for today, Buddhism and war. You know, I can't ever remember a time in my life when there was not some kind of war going on somewhere in the world. And today is no different. Conflicts abound. Is there no way for mankind to find a peaceful way to coexist? It seems like of all the species on our planet, we humans seem to be the worst ones at living in peace and harmony. Years ago, I received a wonderful book titled The Hidden Life of Trees, and I learned so much about trees from that book. Trees are maybe more human than we humans. Trees, for example, live a very selfless life. Rather than living for themselves, trees all want the entire forest to flourish. Trees can communicate with each other through their scent and taste of their bark and leaves. They can warn other trees of danger from insects. Trees give food and nutrients to a sick tree in the forest through their interconnected root system. Trees nurture their young and allow them to grow slowly until they're strong enough to withstand the forces of winds, and then the young trees grow more rapidly. I think the reason why it feels so good to walk in the forest is because we are amongst friends. There's even a new form of therapy now called forest therapy, where people simply walk in the forest for good mental health. Maybe we humans can learn a lesson or two from nature about how to live in peace and harmony. Shinran Shonin was very concerned about peace. My favorite words from Shinran Shonin is his statement, "May the Buddha Dharma spread and may the world be at peace." I think Shinran Shonin saw the spread of the Buddha Dharma as a way for humanity to live peacefully. That message is most relevant even today. It is clear that mankind cannot seem to find political or legal ways to end a war. Religion, too, can be a source of conflict and tension, but it can also be a pathway to healing, understanding, and mutual respect. Now more than ever, we need to return to our teachings that have great meaning for our world today that's in great conflict. May I thank the Southern District, the Southern District ministers, and the Gardena Buddhist Church for their efforts to make today's seminar possible. A special thanks to our guest speaker, Reverend Ken Tanaka, to the Southern District ministers who will also be speaking today, and also another special thanks to Reverend Takata for all of his efforts to coordinate and make the necessary arrangements for this seminar. I hope you have a wonderful seminar today in listening to the Dharma, meeting each other, and sharing your own thoughts and reflections. Thank you. Naman Davats, Naman Davats, Naman Davats, Naman.
Welcome to this morning's session. I'm going to be the moderator, which means I stand here. But the one thing I will do is I'm going to reintroduce our guest speaker. I will repeat some information that you already got from Reverend Takata and Reverend Hirano. But our guest speaker today is Reverend Kenneth Kenshin Tanaka. Reverend Tanaka grew up in the Mountain View Buddhist Temple. He was an active member of the Young Buddhist Association at the local district and national levels. After attending the 1969 summer session at the Institute of Buddhist Studies, he made the decision to pursue a career in Buddhism. After graduating from Stanford University with a bachelor's degree in cultural anthropology, he specialized in the study of Buddhism at various institutions that included a stint as a Theravada monk in Thailand, then as a graduate student at the Institute of Buddhist Studies, where he got his master's degrees, Tokyo University, another master's degree, and the University of California at Berkeley for a PhD in Buddhist Studies. He taught at IBS for 11 years, that was 84 through 1995, and served as the minister of the Southern Alameda Buddhist County Church for 3 years, between 1995 and 1998. Reverend Dr. Tanaka retired 5 years ago as professor and director of the Institute of Buddhist Culture, at the Institute of Buddhist Culture at the Musashino University in Tokyo, a Jodo Shinshu-based institution with about 10,000 students. He is the past president of two academic associations, the International Association of Shin Buddhist Studies and the Japanese Association for the Study of Buddhism and Psychology. His publications include Jewels, an introduction to American Buddhism for youth, scouts, and the young at heart, with a bit of humor. That's through the Society for the Promotion of Buddhism, the BDK. and that was in 2021. Ocean, his well-known popular work, Ocean, An Introduction to Jodo Shinshu Buddhism in America, Wisdom Ocean Publications, back in 1987, and the publication of his doctoral dissertation, reworked as The Dawn of Chinese Pure Land Buddhist Doctrine, that was put out by the State University of New York Press in 1990. Ocean, the book most of us know, has been translated into Japanese, Chinese, Portuguese, and Spanish, and soon will be translated into German. He is the 2017 recipient of the 27th Nakamura Hajime Eastern Study Prize, which is awarded to scholars who have distinguished themselves in the field of Indian Buddhist studies. And this was presented by the Eastern Institute and the Indian Embassy in Tokyo. He was the object of a 1-hour NHK educational television documentary, The Age of Kokoro, and that was in April of 2018. Dr. Tanaka is married to Carrie Tanaka, and they have 3 adult children, Aaron, who's in Boston, Nathan, living in Richmond, California, and Serena, living in San Francisco. They also have 2 grandsons, and his interests include walking, feeding the neighborhood stray cats, and looking for humor in Buddhism. And so that's our full introduction of Reverend Dr. Ken Tanaka, and we will turn the microphone over to him, if we may, Sensei.
Okay. Thank you, Reverend Gibbs, and good morning to everyone. It's a little too high for me. I didn't expect this. I think Jodo Shinshu, we talk about fellow companion, fellow practitioners. We're on the same level. But anyway, this is what it is, so we have to live with it, like many things in the world. I have entitled my talk, Buddhism and War, How We Can Face Up to It as Shin Buddhists. So, you know, wars have been, as someone said, wars have been going on, the bishop did, that wars have been going on throughout our lives. Maybe not just here in the US, but somewhere in the world, the wars have been going on. And so this is nothing really new, although I think it hits us home closer, especially with the Ukraine and the war in the Middle East. So I'd like to begin. First of all, you should all have a copy of my book, Jewels, which is being provided to you free of charge from the BDK. I may refer to this during my talk. We won't be able to go into detail, but on my outline as well, I do have in the outline, the main points that I wish to make. As usual, I have probably too much more than I can really talk about it in depth, and hopefully that if you have any questions or concerns, you can always email me, and my email number is right at the top, and feel free to contact me should you have comments and questions. I also have a questionnaire that I have passed that you'll be getting. I would appreciate it if you can fill them out, you know, even a little bit, and so I get a sense of how what I said has come across to you. So just a little bit more about my background. I have lived in Japan for the last 26 years after leaving IBS. And, but now starting this year, my wife and I will be living here half the time and then Japan half the time. The winters and summers in the US, and then spring and fall in Japan, which means that I'll be in good weather throughout the year. So in a way, I'll be in the Pure Land every month of the year. You know, Pure Land, one of the descriptions of a Pure Land is that it's neither not too hot, not too cold. So anyway, I feel fortunate to be in the Pure Land of Southern California today. First of all, when we think about this topic, we need to keep in mind that Buddhism is a first-person religion, that it has to affect me, and we have to think seriously about what it means for me and how I can, participate, how I can get engaged. And so rather than Bukkyo, which is the usual Japanese for Buddhism, I say Butsudo. Butsudo, do means the path. So path means practice. So it doesn't matter how much you know in your head, but if you don't practice it and exercise it in your life, it's virtually meaningless in my opinion. So we have to make an effort to practice, walk the Buddhist path. So it's Butsudo. And if you know Japanese, I always say this corny pun, if you don't do that, I will Butsudo. See, I get nothing, no reaction. Yeah, it didn't go over very well, but it actually should be Butsuzo. I will hit you, I'll clobber you if you don't practice it. In Japan, it goes off relatively pretty well. But it's okay, I'm used to it, yeah. But people ask me, do you like Japan or US? And I often say, well, good in both places, but I like Japan more recently because people laugh at my jokes. Here and back here, especially in Mountain View, with the guys that I grew up with, they roll their eyes. Say, oh, there he goes again, Tanaka joke. But recently, they have acknowledged that I've gotten a little bit better. So, okay, as far as the war, we need to put this in the first person. And one of the episodes that I like to share is that when I was, I think it was in college, that one of my former Dharma school buddies, or he was a couple years older than me, he was killed in the Vietnam War. And we had a funeral. They could not open the casket because his body was not in a shape to be shown to others. And that really made me think about the realities of war. Up till that time, Vietnam was very far away. But here, one of my classmates, who went to Dharma school together, and he was in the casket. And so that really made me realize that, war is not theoretical, that it's really hits home. And to think of, about his parents, what it meant for his parents. And so, and the other thing is, recently I went back to my hometown, where my family came from in Yamaguchi, and I visited my gravesite. And next to the main tombstone, there was a small tombstone, and it was the tombstone for my uncle, who had died in the war in Siberia. And I knew about the fact that he had died, but to really, see the tombstone, I felt, gee, we just say, well, our uncle died in the war, during the Second World War. But when you really think about it, you think about, wow, I wonder how it was for him, how he died, how, in what shape and in what form he died. And he must have been, he must have hurt. And he must have been lonely being away from his family. And when you really get deep down into the issue, it's very real. And it's something that when we use words like war, it's kind of theoretical. But I would like each of you to really think about how the war has hit you very personally, emotionally, existentially, because that's what it is. And I live in Japan most of the time, or at least up till now. And we always hear about the news of North Korea and how even recently they've, shot some missiles And I'm very aware that if you ever shoots at Japan, you'll be to Tokyo, where I'm living. And then it's not, it's some distant concern even for yourself, because as we know, he's trying to develop a ballistic missile, intercontinental ballistic missile that can reach, U.S. And so the war is not just simply in Ukraine, simply in the Middle East, but it hits home our family, our friends, and then potentially it can hit us. So those are the thoughts that we need to, I think, keep in mind as we think about this topic. And my main talk, the talk has three components. The first part is, as Buddhists, of course, we seek to promote peace and avoid war. That's a no-brainer. I mean, that's obvious. So I want to talk about that first. And then second, however, having said that, we recognize that at times we are unable to fully live up to the above ideals. I think as Jodo Shinshu Buddhists, we're very cognizant of our failings, our bonbu-ness. And we need to keep that in mind, that even though we talk about the ideals, that we have tendencies to, in a way, endorse war, maybe not endorse, but be involved in activities that have the qualities of fighting and hatred. And third, so despite all of this, we still must religiously do what we can to seek and avoid war in the Sahara world. So the first point, so as Buddhists, we value peace and avoid hatred that can lead to war. I think in Buddhism, in early Buddhism, there's much discussion about hatred, which is part of the three poisons, right? What are the three poisons? Greed, hatred, and stupidity or ignorance, which amounts to gas, G-A-S. And so we're talking about the very things that create and cause suffering, and especially hatred. So in the precepts, there are the 5 precepts that most Buddhists throughout the world abide by. And in it, there is the I shall refrain from taking the life of a living being. In Thailand, I remember when I became a monk, I had to recite this in Pali. Panatipata varamani sikapadam samadhiyami. And that's exactly, I shall refrain from taking life of a living being. And even in the 10 wholesome acts, which are part of the 6 perfections, 6 paramitas. In Jodo Shinshu, we talk about 6 perfections. The second one is precepts. And among the precepts, you have the I shall refrain from taking the life of a living being. So it's right there in the main tenets of our basic teachings. Now, this one you've heard. Hatred is not overcome by hatred. Only by abandoning hatred can hatred be overcome. This is an eternal truth. And this is found in Dhammapada, one of the main scriptures of the early Buddhism. And this particular line changed history. Some of you may know this, but many people don't know. Changed history, especially with regard to Japan. So, in 1951, when there was a peace conference held in San Francisco. Japan had lost the war, and they were to be admitted to the world community. And many of the countries were upset, and they want Japan to pay reparation, huge sums of money. And it was going in that direction, but then J.R. Jayawardeneh, who was the finance minister of Ceylon, spoke and spoke up and he cited this particular passage. He said, hatred ceases not by hatred, but by love. He, rather than saying abandoning hatred, he said love, which was probably very effective. Use a word that most people can relate to. And this changed the flow of the discussion so that Japan no longer had to pay huge sums of reparation and was admitted back into the world community, and thereby enabling Japan to, make the miraculous economic recovery that it did to become a number 2, economy in the world, and though it's number 3 now. But many people feel that without that, Japan would have have had a tougher time. So a Buddhist concept that is found in the Dhammapada, hatred is not overcome by hatred, but only by love, or abandoning hatred can peace be realized. So this is at the foundation of Buddhism, and Shinran, shown in 2, cited this, which we cite quite often. And I think one of the ministers cited this just today. May there be peace in the world, and may the Dharma spread. So we have a notion that by spreading and sharing the Dharma, that can contribute to peace. Having said that, it's not easy, of course, because wars have to do with the realm of politics and not religion. Shinran Shonin also understands that we need to maintain this on an individual level. And this passage, which I was not too aware until I prepared for this talk, in one of his letters, he says, "Neither should we despise those who scorn and slander people of Nembutsu. Rather, you should have compassion and care for them." This was Honen's teaching. So even in those days, Shinran's group and Honen's group was criticized, but he's saying, don't have hatred even for those who hate you, trying to suppress you. Now, Buddhism in America tends to have a good image. Buddhism is growing in the U.S. One of my fields of specialization has been in American Buddhism. Well, in Japan, not too many people know much about American Buddhism, and so I began to write about it, and so in a way I've become the expert on American Buddhism in Japan. And so I have been giving a lot of talks, especially when I go beyond the Jodo Shinshu groups in Japan. It's often they want me to talk about American Buddhism. And in my research on American Buddhism, which actually I started even before I left for Japan, I got very interested in Buddhism in America because, when we were growing up, hardly any Buddhists except for us Japanese and some Chinese Americans. But, in the 1970s, more Asians began to see more Asian people in the community, and Buddhism began to grow. And then all of a sudden, Buddhism has taken off in a very positive way. But anyway, I wish to go back to the perception of Buddhism. That one of the studies in the early 2000s showed that Buddhism was thought to be violent, only 12%, fanatical, 23%, but tolerant and peace-loving, especially peace-loving, is 63%. So there is a perception within the American public that Buddhism is a religion that loves peace. So what that means is that we need to keep that image up. Now, current war in Middle East. I know that all of you and many of you are concerned about that. And this is a complicated, issue, needless to say. And I think that if Prime Minister Netanyahu had adopted the attitude that we found in the Dhammapada, hatred is not overcome by hatred, only by abandoning hatred. And if he had said, okay, It's awful what happened in October the 7th. But maybe this is a fresh start, not react with hatred, but, abandoning hatred, and then really sit down and start the peace process, the two-state plan that has been, advocated by many people. And if he had done that, things would be very, very different. Don't you think so? I think that Netanyahu, personally speaking, he has been detrimental to the peace of Middle East. I think the situation is far more complicated, much more deep-seated. The passions are so deep-seated that we here, in America cannot fully understand. And I realized this when I was back almost 50 years ago, when I was traveling around the world, went to the West Bank, and I met two teenagers. And it's not in your outline, but I thought about this. I remember that I met two teenagers, and we were talking about their situation, and one of them kneeled down and grabbed the dirt from where we were, and he said, "See, this is our land. This is our soil. This is our soil, and our ancestors have been here for eons, and this is our." But it's been taken away, and you can see the passion, and he said, "Look, see how beautiful this place is." Well, frankly, I thought it wasn't that beautiful. It was kind of desert-like, But still, for them, that's their land, and the passion with which they spoke, and I never forget that. When I think about this, that the reality is represented by that young teenager who grabbed the soil and said, "This is our land," but unfortunately, Netanyahu is not practicing what the Dhammapada states, nor is he practicing probably what the Jewish religion also is advocating. So that's the difficulty of having, dealing with matters of the world, which is often led by politicians and people who don't have the true religious sentiment, be it Judaism or Christianity or Islam or Buddhism. And so on one hand, as I talk, Saha world, in Buddhism we refer to this realm as Saha. Saha, what it means, it means a realm in which we endure. That's the meaning of Saha, Japanese Shaba. And so, in one sense, I have two feelings about, matters of the world, that it ain't going to change. I hate to say this. This is going to go on. Somewhere in the world there will be conflicts because it's the nature of human being. But on the other hand, I am a Buddhist, and I want to aspire to practice and practice Buddhism myself, but also to see the ideals of Buddhism being, actualized in the world. And I think we have to, I try to keep these two dimensions of, the reality, but at the same time not giving up. And I think that on one hand, the Indian notion that everything, is samsara and we have to get off the cycle. But at the same time, I think that maybe it's the American in me. It is try to make, improve the situation. Social issues like racism, etc. Things are still hasn't really improved in many ways. It kind of goes like this. But in some sense, it has. I think if you look at the bigger picture, the discrimination and racism, and, I think American society has gotten better. But it's not perfect, obviously. So maybe as we think about the war, we maintain these two dimensions. At least that's how I look at it. So, so the second dimension of my talk has to do with the reality that even though we talk about the ideals, we're not able to fully live up to our ideals. So this is something that we need to keep in mind as well as Buddhists, especially as Jodo Shinshu Buddhists. I want to share a story about Reverend Serhiy Trilis, who is an Ukrainian Buddhist priest. Yes, that's right. There are Buddhists in Ukraine. And I met him recently and had a Zoom dialogue with him or an interview. And he had just arrived to Japan after serving as a soldier in the Ukraine army for 11 months. And here is a Buddhist priest fighting. And in the interview, he said, "We must fight this war to realize peace." So therein lies the contradiction, almost a dilemma, that when you're attacked like that, do we just keep still? But he chose to, participate in order to realize peace. So he said, "I must fight to realize peace." So that's the reality. And if you're interested on the outline, I have a link to an interview, the recording, so you can take a look at that afterwards. Here is Reverend Trilis right here. He is of the Nichiren denomination, and his teacher is Japanese, and he became ordained, 30 years ago. He's 50 years old now, and here's sitting in the middle, and then he's right over here as well. And here is a photo of him as a Ukrainian soldier. See the conflict? And he has 3 kids, and his wife is still a fervent Buddhist, and they're all now in Japan. And so I've been doing what I can to support him because he seems like such a nice guy, very dedicated, and so. But when I interviewed him, I realized the difficulty of keeping our ideals, and so this is the second point I'm making. Okay, so we talk about the ideals, but the reality is that we are embedded in a reality in which war cannot be ruled out. Okay, so another example is that I know some of you like samurai drama, but I always feel that when the good guy, the hero, slays the enemy, or they kind of fall down and just kind of disappear. But if you really think about it, have you ever seen those swords, Japanese swords? They are sharp. And if you get hit by one of them and slashed, it's not just a cut on your hand, but it's ugly. And I'm sure that it's hurtful, painful, blood and all that. But we rarely even think about it. We kind of, have esteem for these dramas. And so in a way, the point is that we watch these dramas and we're not really looking at the reality. The reality is that when, someone gets cut, that's painful, it's ugly, it's not pleasant. But we kind of enjoy it. And we enjoy these games, electronic games. They're always fighting, battling, and so I personally don't like those games, and I don't. And recently there was on NHK a one-year drama on Tokugawa Ieyasu. I thought, this is interesting. I began. The first episode is all fighting, and it got to be pretty gory. And the point that I'm making now, I just don't want to be involved in this. I just feel like it's not. I don't need this. But the point is, so these violence, killing, wars are themes in our movies, dramas, and electronic games, and so it's part of our culture, and we celebrate it in some sense. So I think it's something that we need to keep in mind. And then Shinran Shonin, understands the deep quality or the nature, human nature. Tannisho, which is one of the most famous writings attributed to Shinran sayings, in chapter 13, he makes a statement. It is not that you do not kill because your heart is good. In the same way, a person may not wish to harm anyone and yet end up killing 100 or 1,000 people. So, we are all good Buddhists, especially you, because you're good enough to come to a seminar like this. And I don't know how you're feeling when I said that. But even us, if the conditions are right, we can kill 1,000 people. If it came to a choice between your family or someone else, we'll do whatever we can to protect our family and myself, or the conditions are ripe. And I also, living in Japan and as well as in U.S., we're feeling more antagonism towards China, more and more. But we have to keep in mind that, there are people, Chinese people, some of them I know personally, they're people. And so we don't want to kind of demonize certain nations and their people. But we get into this, and we get kind of, roped into it. So as a Buddhist, we have to keep kind of objectivity about this, not to buy into this. But though we think we're good persons, but if the conditions are right, we can kill one person. We can, yeah. So that is another example of the reality. And in Buddhism, the Buddhist institutions in Japan, and which talk about the ideals that I have been talking about. But throughout the history of even Shin Buddhism, there is a distinction made between secular ruler's law called Obo versus the Buddha's law, Buppo. Okay? So the Buppo, for example, Renyo Shonin, our second founder, he began to kind of advocate this kind of view that we are maintaining the Buddha's law, but the world matters related to the secular, we leave it up to the kings and the emperors, and did not really participate and speak out when unjust wars were carried out or injustices were carried out. So kept a kind of a safe distance, the Buddhist groups did. And there was, during the Second World War, what is called Senji Kyogaku in Japanese. It's the wartime doctrine. There are all kinds of doctrines to rationalize fighting. One example is, the notion of no self. This is a very complicated concept that's often misunderstood. No self, non-self. And this kind of thinking, it's called Meshi Hoko. Meshi means to annihilate. The shi is watashi, myself. Annihilate the self and serve the nation. So based on the Buddhism of non-attachment, false interpretation of non-self was promoted to say to the, like my uncle, you're Japanese, so serve the public, the nation, and annihilate yourself. So this kind of thinking didn't, of course, happen all the time, but at times the Buddhist doctrine of non-self was kind of reinterpreted in a way to minimize your demands and contribute to the welfare of all. And so this is not, a terrible and unjust interpretation, in my opinion, of what non-self is. Non-self basically means non-ego-centeredness. That doesn't mean that you annihilate yourself or you demean yourself. And so Buddhism, my point is that Buddhist institutions have contributed to a war. And I'm sure that during Second War in Japan, the Christian churches also supported the war in the U.S. Now, something a little bit more to home is that okay, I haven't been citing, so I would just ask you to take a look on page, if you have the book, we'll do it just once, so that on page 82, I have, this is a chapter on the history of American Buddhism, and in 1985, on page 82, the Institute of Buddhist Studies Graduate School and Seminary becomes the first institution of higher learning to be certified by the Department of Defense to train Buddhist chaplains for the American Armed Forces. And most of you probably know that, and it is in some sense, it is a positive thing, but at the same time, we are participating in the military. So however way you think about chaplaincy, we're not pristine, and in a way, we are, taking part in the military. Now, I personally don't find to be, that we are selling out, but I'm more of the opinion that if we have a say in what goes on in the world, that we make our presence. But at the same time, when you do that, you are being part of the system. So again, this is part of the Saha world. We're not living in a pure world. But I think that what the IBS can do is, because we're going to have the military anyway, so if that's the case, then why don't we have a spiritual presence there for those who seek it? So, but I think we have to also keep in mind the reality of this. So these are the examples of the second point, that, in the real world, we talk about the ideals, but we're not fully able to actualize them. Okay, so the third point is that nevertheless, even though we cannot be pure, that we as Jodo Shinshu Buddhists need to do what we can to seek peace and avoid war. And we'll go back to the first point. So this is one of my diagrams that I've been using for many years, and this is the horizontal dimension is the real world. It's in a wavy line because it's up and down. So when it's down, it's the war. When we have suffering, it's the down part. So life is full of difficulties. But the vertical is the Buddhist path. So for those of us who have a spiritual tradition, that's represented by the purple. And so the aim in Buddhism is, of course, to go all the way to the top. To reach the very top is to become Buddha. That's the ultimate aim, even of Jodo Shinshu too. Of course, in the present life, we cannot reach Buddhahood in this life, but we can realize Shinjin, which we put it maybe halfway up the half, I always say somewhere around there. And then when we realize Shinjin, or even if we don't realize Shinjin, and the question of, when do you know if you have Shinjin and all that's a whole new topic that we cannot deal with it here. But I think that as long as we're walking the path, the Butsudo that I talked about earlier, that you are rising above the horizontal and And then when you do that, you will automatically, work towards minimizing, fighting and hatred and promoting peace. So the very nature of the teachings that we talked about in the first point one, they will be actualized, naturally if you walk the path. So in other words, if the true, the honest, true spiritual path will lead to us automatically and naturally promoting peace and avoiding hatred. Okay, so let's see if you're interested in what I'm talking about here, please take a look at the textbook later. And the point that I wish to emphasize is that if you have a spiritual path, it's the vertical, and the aim is to aspire for the top. And then, so the point is that we do not promote peace and avoid war, not because we have to. So in the area of ethics, there are three kinds of ethics. One is called, in a difficult word called deontological, but I call it obligation. We don't do it because we're obligated to do it, okay? Or is it for teleological, another big word, but means to attain some future objective. I think much of early Buddhism, Buddhist precepts are that way. We practice this in order to become Buddha. But Joro Shinshu perspective is what we call virtue ethic. By the virtue of the fact that you're going up the path, that will automatically translate into promoting peace and avoiding hatred and avoiding war. I think I've been walking the path all these years, and I would say 30 years ago, I began to get to a point where I could no longer kill ants. When I was little, I regret it very much now. When I was little, 10, 12, when I was living in Mountain View, we lived on a farm, and there were a lot of ants everywhere, and I remember killing ants, going spraying. I don't know why I did that. I could never do that. In fact, today in Japan, there are a lot more ants than here, and so as I walk out the door into the street, especially in the summer months, there are ants crawling, and I avoid stepping on the ants, and I consider it my religious practice, and avoiding and also cockroaches. Cockroaches are the most hated insect in the world, I think. I don't know if you have cockroaches here. You do, right? Yeah. They've been around longer than us humans. And so I know my better half who is here, she doesn't like cockroaches. And so we put up these little, things to, keep them away. But I think they kill them, if they go into the little boxes. And so, but I cannot, fight my wife because, happy wife, happy life, right? And so I'm trying to practice that Buddhist precept. No, maybe it's not Buddhist. It's American. But anyway, so I see little cockroaches sometimes, and then I cannot step on them. I cannot. So when I see them, I try to pick it up, paper, and try to throw it away. And sometimes, as I'm doing this, my wife, I can see her coming down the stairs. I feel like it's ogre coming down. I said, "Okay, hurry up, go." No, I shouldn't make fun of my wife, but that that's her prerogative. She doesn't like, cockroaches, and just like I don't like snakes. It's just they really bother me. But the point is that if you can help it, not even insects, you would not want to kill. Not want to kill because of obligation or because it leads to some better thing for yourself. No, it's because that's the way you want to be. You cannot help but to be that way. So that's the. So we practice the Shinran's teachings of not hating people who hate us. May there be peace in the world, and so. I think as an institution, we need to continue to make stands and express ourselves in the world, and which we have. I recall as national YB, I was involved in national YBA, Western Young Buddhist League, and in the 1960s and early 70s, we took stands on Vietnam War, which I think is important, and I think that we Buddhist organizations should make stands and protests which go against our basic teaching. But just bear in mind, however, that when we get involved in social issues, we have differences of opinion within the Sangha. It can divide the Sangha. Certain issues are, no-brainer. Most people agree. But there are certain things that will make it difficult for a religious institution to take stands. And so when that happens, then there has to be a lot more discussion. And what is important is leadership by the ministers. I think that that is a constant, and it's going to be a forever concern. But I think that more so than in Japan, that American Jodo Shinshu can be a kind of a model for future Buddha Jodo Shinshu in the world, to show that it's not simply the happiness within on an individual basis, but if really there is happiness and if there's suffering out there, that we need to do whatever we can, and then it will be better if you can do as an institution. Now, as matters of the world, there are so many things, big issues like the climate change and all that, and then we feel so, minuscule. We can't really do very much. What can I do? But there is a wonderful parable called Gratitude, the Bamboo Thicket, and I'll just ask you to read it later, but it's about a parrot who wants to save the forest fire. And what the parrot does is that she goes to the lake and dips her wings and then flies out and drops the droplets over the forest fire. And so the Brahma sees this and said that the Hindu god and says, "Oh, that's crazy. You can't." So he tells the parrot, but the parrot expresses his or her desire to do whatever I can, because these are my friends down there being burned out. I want to do what I can, and so that sincerity and that posture really impressed the Brahma, and so Brahma, using his divine strength, together put out the fire. But the point is that even a little dropping drops from the wings, it seems like it's of no use, but I think the effort is important. So what we can do with the war in Ukraine and whatever in the Middle East, well, if you feel up to it, donate to organizations. And I try to donate at least 15% of my income to all these various organizations. And mine is very little, but it's what I can do. I'm trying to live up to the spirit. And so there is a model for us. So if we all do our small part, collectively we can go in the right direction. I feel a little bit positive about global warming. I think that we're still not there yet, but we're making strides, and economically it's getting much easier and much cheaper to have ecologically friendly technology. And so I hope that we move in that direction. Basically, it's our generation, most of us who are at least 60 years old, we reap the benefit of all that we spent, and it's the younger generation that will have to pay the price, and not only our younger generation, but the rest of the world, So we still have time, and so I always say, if you're over 60, that you should spend the rest of your life dedicating much more of your effort and time and money for the collective, I like the American saying that when I leave this world, I like to leave the world in a better shape than when I came in. And I tell this to my when I speak in Japan, there's one thing good about American, attitude. And there is that attitude of, making it better when I leave. And so, just do whatever we can. Okay, so one of the things, there are 3 qualities. I think Reverend Gibbs mentioned the fact that I was, the NHK did a 1-hour documentary on my activities. And this director asked me out of the blue, he says, what did you, what are the qualities of being religious? And so it was kind of, I said, and I thought about it, and I said, compassion and love, equality, and a sense of oneness or interdependence. These 3 qualities. Any true religion, any person who has been affected by any true religion will have these qualities. Don't you agree? That if you know of any people who are, truly someone that you can respect, they have these qualities. And that as we walk up that vertical path, these qualities will grow. These qualities will mature. And all these qualities lead to avoiding war and promoting peace. And then I want to close soon. So anyway, this diagram shows going from what we talked earlier. This is basically general Buddhism, but Jodo Shinshu is different. On the right-hand side, this circle of compassion, or Amida, or the workings of Dharmakaya, Tathagata, Amida Buddha, and that is the hallmark of Jodo Shinshu, and we are embraced in it, and so we don't have to walk up the vertical path on our own power, but just realize that we are already in the circle of compassion. We're already embracing compassion. And that makes a whole lot of difference. And when our earthly life ends, we are already embraced, and we will be part of that compassion, circle of compassion. Okay, so I probably need to go through. Okay, I'll just focus on this last point. With Shinjin, which is our awakening in Jodo Shinshu, it's also called, in Shinran's terms, karmic consciousness, called Goshiki. And it refers to Shinjin. And when we experience Shinjin, that we become one with the inner cause, outer cause, which is name and light. He uses a metaphor, father and mother are the outer causes. So we become, so the last line, when the inner and outer causes merge, one realizes the true body in the fulfilled land. And so we are, in a way, as we walk up the Buddhist, the Jodo Shinshu path, we are one with this outer cause of light, name and light. And when we are one with Amida's workings, we are participating in those 3 qualities that I mentioned, that love and compassion, equality, and the last one is interdependence and oneness. We are exhibiting that, we are part of that, and then when our earthly life ends, we are part of this Amida's working. And so, this is another huge topic, life after death. And the way I envision, the way I imagine, is that I'm not going to be up in the Pure Land, enjoying my peaceful life away from all of the realm things happening in the Saha world. But I consider myself part of the workings of Amida, and that I will continue to be a part of that, and which means that I am being part of this love and compassion, equality, and sense of oneness, and therefore that eternally I am participating in that which promotes peace and try to avoid hatred and ignorance. So our concern about the realities of the war, it's tied to our spiritual life, our religious life. And so those 3 points, we have our ideals, but second, we cannot fully live up to them. But nevertheless, we continue to plug on because that is what it means to be a Jodo Shinshu Buddhist. And if you walk that path sincerely, you are participating in an effort to realize love and compassion and equality and a sense of oneness. So in that sense, the matters of the world, the concerns that really concerns us, the war, it is a religious concern, and that it also helps us to cultivate and deepen our religious development. And so I know that the matters of the world are frustrating at times, but at least you can turn that into in a way that can further our spiritual and religious lives. Okay, Namandats.
We're going to ask Reverend John Turner to take the stage now.
Please join me in Gasho. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. I too would like to thank everyone for inviting me to speak today. I found this to be a very difficult discussion, a very difficult topic. But first I wanted to mention, after listening to Reverend Tanaka, I have improved with my insect killing as well. But for me, it's silverfish. I still can't get over that. And then I really liked what he talked about things being in the first person. For me, Buddhism is something that's very personal. It's a practice, a path, and a way. So I don't think so much anymore about whether I can change the world, but I think a lot about how the world can change how it looks to me and the value I find in it. So I wanted to list 2 things that are why I find it difficult to talk about Buddhism, and out of those 2 things, maybe it points to a solution. So what I've noticed is in the last several months, I've been getting questions like these. One of our devout members at OCBC sent me an email. She wanted to know about what is Buddhist justice. And then I got an email to talk about Buddhism and war. And my wife is a yoga instructor. There's a 2-level ordination in their tradition. But I think because Buddhism is considered one of the great world religions and yoga is not, people that take yoga tend to focus on the how, the practice. But it's lost all of its spiritual depth as a consequence. And yoga instructors are very frustrated with the lack of authenticity in the United States. It's not about balance. It's not about core strength. It's not about any of those things. But with Buddhism, the questions I get are what and why questions. I rarely get how questions. And it makes it quite difficult, I think. So what they're asking me is they want doctrinal answers. The issues are external. And they're looking for some grand overall organizing principle for societies. And Buddhism's a different cat, right? I think those are questions that we're used to asking of Christianity. And since Buddhism is one of the world religions, we must have answers for that as well. So I went on the internet and searched about, and there was an important essay written on violence and nonviolence in Shinran by Dennis Hirota, and he covered a lot of this. He says that modern discussions of violence commonly pursue rules of conduct rooted in universal norms. A great deal of effort in modern liberal society is investing in defining and applying codes of conduct. There is a widespread assumption that such codes can be generated from a single source or principle. We seek a unitary standard that will enable a shared determination of appropriate action in specific situations, thus fostering a just society in which individuals enjoy both communal order and freedom, unfettered by either the threat of violence or undue constraint. So we're looking for rules, universal rules that we can apply. And I'm a math computer scientist by trade, and I love rules. I love rules. And I used to try to come up with a decision tree or hierarchy about, should I stay married? Should I get a divorce? My husband won't stop drinking. I'm pregnant. Should I get married? And I realized there's just too many unknowns, and there's just not enough data. And life is very gray. And there really isn't a set of rules that you can apply that someone's handed to you in life. You have to make decisions even though you don't have enough information. When you raise kids, you can't abdicate. You have to take action, but you're never really sure if you're doing the right thing or not. But you got to do something. So religious traditions, this is the idea of being a world religion, are often understood to have served in the past to provide such foundational principles. In most Buddhist traditions, an emphasized notion of karma, right? This is this idea that karma is some kind of a punishment that goes around. If you do good things, you get good karma. And various formulations of virtues and precepts for monastics and lay practitioners may be seen to have offered such support. So it's almost like we've been rooting around in the sutras and the commentaries and the Vinaya, looking for something that would satisfy this Western Christian appetite for rules. The Vinaya is the precepts and monastic rules that they follow when they're off in their pristine monasteries. But what I found is you can't really look there for the answers, because these are rules that have to do with preserving a communal living environment, right? It's like when I was at the dorms at UCLA. There were a lot of rules. I couldn't play my stereo loud. You were never allowed to go out on the balcony of your window, and if you did, you were gone. All the rules had to do with so that you could live together peacefully and complement one another. It wasn't really meant to answer life's big questions. It was to keep the commune running smoothly. But recent efforts by Buddhists to reinterpret such guidelines for practice as the 6 Paramitas or the 5 precepts in terms of contemporary social life reflect the modern demand for the codes of conduct. So this is something that people want from us, and I really can't give it to them. I have to reframe the question. I have to ask it in a different way. I have to answer a different question. And I have to explain to them how Buddhism's just different. We're just different. You're looking for something that you may not be able to find. And a lot of this is called concept matching. When I came to Jodo Shinshu and I heard about the Eightfold Noble Path, I thought, oh, great, this is just like the 10 Commandments. This is perfect. I just swap one out for the other. But they're really not the same at all, right? Just because one's 8 and one's 10 and it looks like a list, they're not the same. So we're going to shift to a second reason why I think things are difficult. I think the real problem we have is a war between our idea of self and the other. And it's very difficult to talk about the Middle East right now in the United States. You have to pick a side. One side is demonized and the other side isn't. And if you kind of walk the middle, you can't really do that. So I think as ministers, it's very difficult to talk about these topics. And so we boil things down into us versus them, good guys versus bad guys. We isolate the other as somehow inferior or different to us. They're not like us, they're different. They just don't understand. In this one, it says, stop othering me. What's othering? Oh, your kind would never understand. So we do this with immigrants, right? They're the other, something we don't understand, and it's difficult to appreciate. So in an article, Ken Yamada in a sense, replied to Dennis Hirota's Violence and Nonviolence in Shinran. And he called it War in Jodo Shinshu. And he mentions Dennis Hirota. He says, Dennis Hirota wrote in his essay, Violence and Nonviolence in Shinran, that violence and other aggressive acts surface from afflicting passions, our bono, our ego attachment, and deepen one's entanglement in samsara and existence. So in a sense, it's this strong sense of self and thinking that we're right and that we know causes us to act out in violence and not be open to other ideas and to other opinions. So I really like this quote. When our ego gets large, we start to self-magnify, and we mistake our opinions for fact. This is another difficulty, right? We think we're right because it's just a fact. It's just common sense. But likely it's just an opinion or a feeling. So it says that they are rooted in forms of violence directed towards self-magnification and division from others. He also writes, consequently, for Shinran, mental acts are the primary form of violence. So, you know, the problem's not in the stars, it's in ourselves. It's a me problem. You know, if I don't understand the Middle East, it's my problem. It's my problem. And as Shakyamuni states to Ajatasattu, it is like a person who, in a drunken fit, slays his own mother, but when he has become sober again, is overcome by remorse. So, you know, we're drunk with our own ego and our own self-righteousness. And it's not that we're bad in the sense that we're unaware. So we use the word evil in our tradition, and that's a huge trigger word in our Christian culture, but it has more to do with being unaware, of just being blissfully unaware, oblivious to the things we do. You know, we insult, we're cruel, and we're likely totally unaware of what we're doing. I feel this way about my neighbors, and they feel that way about me. So in this way, Shinran traces the contours of realization born from the evil of violence, the encounter with the teaching, and the birth of self-awareness. So, you know, this is the path, I think, is to become self-aware, not necessarily better, but self-aware. So I still think the things I've always thought, but now I know they're kind of just what I think without any real evidence or proof. They're just opinions. And this can help lead to a mind that's more supple, more pliable, and more open. So you just have to know you're doing it to be saved. You don't have to stop doing it. So Dennis Hirota mentions a quote by Dostoevsky and the heroes in Dostoevsky. He says, "We are all to blame. The recognition that we are all complicit in sin is the gateway to grace, and hence the transformation which can take us out of the structures of evil. We are at the antithesis of self-righteous anger when we can realize this." So now I want to share with you quotes. I have good quotes, and I want to make sure I could get them in. When you save the best for last, you got to make sure you get to the last. My daughter teaches high school geometry, algebra, and she said the hardest thing for teaching is pacing. I got 20 minutes, so I got to keep my pacing. So we have several atomic bomb survivors at OCBC. One of them is Mr. Sadashina, and he's very self-aware. About 10 years ago, he came to OCBC for an interview for a documentary. And before and after the documentary, I was able to talk to him. And I kind of wanted to shake him and say, you know, how can you live in the United States? Like, how can you not be more angry, right? An atomic bomb was dropped on you. I don't think I could overcome that. And he looked at me and smiled, and he said, "John, There's enough guilt to go around for everyone. Just like Dostoevsky, everyone's guilty. And because he saw that, he could let that go. And I get goosebumps right now. That was his teaching, that one sentence to me. And so this is something we can all strive for. So we're going to go for a solution, I hope. Ken Yamada concludes saying, the image of Buddhists, especially in Jodo Shinshu, is one of humbleness, gratitude, and self-reflection, attributes that seemingly make us seem passive and aloof. Does Jodo Shinshu give us strength to stand up for peace? As history has shown, I think the answer is a resounding yes. So I want to share with you some of my quotes. Now, when I read, I don't care anymore whether I agree with the quote or the book. I only care that it makes me think. So Benjamin Franklin, in 1789, when he was an ambassador to France, and he was drinking lots of wine, and he was partying, and this is after the Revolutionary War, this is one of the quotes he gave. He said, "There never was a good war or a bad peace." Now, you just have to think about it, and what does that mean? So for me, World War II probably had to be fought, but maybe the problem was back in World War I, where Germany was ostracized and isolated. So when we get to war, that's the last step of a long set of circumstances that led to that. So if we're getting into a war, like in the Middle East, I looked it up, it's so complicated, but there's been at least 100 years of mistakes made in the Middle East. There's a border drawn that's incorrect that causes conflict. They call it Churchill's hiccup. And one of the members at OCBC told me that she wishes the Middle East could just get together and stop litigating the past 100 years and look for a solution. That was her wish. And I'd also like to share this with you. This is an actual bumper sticker from 1969. It's on sale at eBay right now for $34.99. And this bumper sticker I saw during the Vietnam War. 1967 was a summer of love, and 1968 was not. We had RFK assassinated, Martin Luther King. We had the riots at the Chicago Democratic National Convention. We had the Vietnam War. And I saw this bumper sticker, and it said, "What if they gave a war and nobody came?" Like, you don't have to go, right? You could be invited, but you don't have to jump in with both feet with groupthink. You have a choice, and you have a life. And this really helped me. I come from a long line of pacifists back to the early 1900s in Kansas when they were isolationists. I don't come from a military family. My karma, my background, is to not go. And that's just my family culture. And this, I looked it up. This title is derived from an American anti-war slogan from the hippie subculture during the Vietnam War era, popularized by Charlotte E. Keyes in her 1966 article for McCall's magazine titled, "Suppose They Gave a War and No One Came." And then I would like to share with you a great quote by John Turner. You may have heard of him. This is my quote. "War is seen as a contest to be won rather than as a problem to be solved." And so I look at war as kind of the last step in a long line of mistakes. And it means we failed when we get to war. So, somebody could say to me, "Oh, you wouldn't have fought for our country's freedom, or you wouldn't have fought for, during World War II. It's that I wished it didn't have to get to that point. I mean, there were signs, The Winds of War was actually a show, a TV drama, that it was coming for a long time, and people knew it, and we didn't do anything about it. And I'd like to close with this reading from our service book. It is the Loving Kindness Metta Meditation. I read this a lot of times at city council meetings, and they read it along with me. And when it talks about being honest and loving to your friends, everybody's very loud, and your family, very loud, your neighbors, everybody's really loud. But then when I say to your strangers, I notice it gets a lot quieter. And then when I say for your enemies, everybody stops and I'm the only one talking. So we take loving kindness in our culture, but only so far. It's easy to do with your family and friends, but you really want your strangers and your enemies to be happy and well. If China's happy, we're happy, right? I want North Korea to be happy. And so I'd like to close with Gasho. This is the last third of it. May strangers be happy and well. May no harm or difficulties come to them. May they live in peace and harmony. May my enemies be happy and well. May no harm or difficulties come to them. May they live in peace and harmony. May all beings be happy and well. May no harm or difficulties come to them. May they live in peace and harmony. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Turner Sensei. Wonderful presentation. And now we will ask the other John Sensei, the resident minister of the temple, Reverend John Iwahara, to give us a presentation.
It is indeed sorrowful to give way to impulses with excuse that one is by nature possessed of blind passions, excusing acts that should not be committed, words that should not be said, and thoughts that should not be harbored, and to say that one may follow one's desires in any way whatever. It is like offering more wine before the person has become sober, or urging him to take even more poison before the poison has abated. Here's some medicine, so drink all the poison you like. Words like these should never be said. In people who have long heard the Buddha's name and said the Nembutsu, surely there are signs of rejecting the evil of this world and signs of their desire to cast off the evil in themselves. Please let me take this time to welcome everyone to this year's Winter Pacific Seminar. And for me, it was an honor and a privilege to be asked to be one of the speakers here today, especially since today's event is being held here at the Gardena Buddhist Church, or the temple that I have been assigned to by the office of the bishop. The passage that I began with is a letter that was written by Shinran Shonin. It can be found as letter number 20 in the collection called the Matosho. And if you wish to read the full letter, you will find it on page 553 in the collected works of Shinran. I want to spend time talking about this particular quote, but before I do that, I'd also like to quote from the 17th article Constitution that was written by Shotoku Taishi. Shotoku Taishi is not emphasized very much by us, especially in America, but unfortunately the doors are closed. But if you have a full altar area, the image of Shotoku Taishi is the one that is found to, well, speaking from your perspective, on the far right. I'd like to quote from Article 10. Severing ourselves from the anger from our hearts and discarding our rage from our prejudices, we should not anger over the differences of people. All people have a heart. Hearts become attached to various things. If they were to say this, then this, in other words, becomes our not. If we were to say this, then this, in other words, becomes their not. We are not always the sages, they are not always the imbecile. We are just together simpletons, bombu. The truth of this and not this, who is to clearly determine it? That we are together both clever and imbecilic is like the earring that has no beginning. With this thought, even if those people were to anger, we should be fearful not to again give rise to our own errors. Even if we feel that we alone have gained what is right, we should follow the multitudes and do things together. The 17th Article Constitution is significant because for all intents and purposes, it was this document that made Japan a Buddhist country. And part of the reason why I wanted to introduce Article 10 of this Constitution is because here at the Gardena Buddhist Church, we have the Japanese immersion Nakayoshi preschool. And a rough translation of the preschool's name would be something like the Friendly Preschool. And as the name suggests, all of our students that attend the Nakayoshi Preschool are quite well behaved and are very friendly towards each other. On the other hand, children do often get into fights with each other over something like a toy. They, and by they I'm remembering my childhood, say things like, "That's my toy. Nuh-uh, that's my toy. Give it back to me. No, it's my toy." And while the children continue to fight over the toy, it is important to notice that the toy is no longer a toy. It is no longer something that encourages play and brings joy. Instead, it has become an object of fighting, anger, and possibly hatred. And when parents see siblings fighting over a toy, a common reaction would be to say something like, "If you two don't start playing nicely, then neither of you can play with this toy," and then take the toy away. Unfortunately, sometimes the fighting does not stop. "See, it's your fault that we can't play with the toy. Nuh-uh, it's your fault that we can't play with the toy." And while they're fighting like this, both parties have failed to recognize that before the parent took the toy away, that neither of them were actually playing with the toy. And if the children continue to fight in this way, even after the toy has been taken away, then the toy has been completely transformed and has become a symbol of their anger and possibly even their hatred towards each other. What can we say but silly, foolish, immature little children? On the other hand, we also have to admit that these children are quite sophisticated. They are fighting over a symbol now. Whatever we might call this behavior, it is typically very annoying to see and hear children fighting this way. In sharing this, I can't possibly know how many of you have experienced something like this, either as the children fighting or as the role of the parent. Sadly, I would not be surprised if many of you said that you have experienced this. Actually, it wouldn't surprise me if most of you said that you have experienced this. Truthfully, I would actually hope that all of you have experienced this. And I say this because, and I'm neither proud nor elated to admit this, I would probably feel both relief and satisfaction if I discovered that all of you experienced this. I would feel relief in knowing that I am not the only one. I would also feel satisfaction in knowing that we are all the same, and in that satisfaction, feel justified to maintain what I might call my moral pride. Jodo Shinshu, as seen in the letter of Shinran Shonin that I began with, helps us to see that I have excused acts that should not be committed, words that should not be said, and thoughts that should not be harbored. And before you begin to see me as a completely evil and cruel person, let me take the time to thank all of you again for coming today. And I wanted to greet everyone again because it isn't unusual to hear someone say something like, "I haven't been back to the temple in a long time." When I come, it's usually for something like a funeral or a memorial service. We do come to the temple when we are sad. Fortunately, we also offer programs like this one. We hold Sunday, and some places even hold daily morning services. We have weddings here. We help people to have parties here. We have festivals at our temples. Why do our temples hold all of these different kinds of activities? What is being revealed to us? The short answer is, we are being shown life. We are being shown how life is and that it isn't just about pain and suffering. It may seem like I have contradicted myself. Life is suffering. That's what the first of the Four Noble Truths teaches us. On the other hand, the third noble truth also teaches us that there is an end to suffering. Life is, but isn't just pain and suffering. There is a way that allows us to transcend the world of suffering. This is the fourth noble truth. In general terms, we would call this Buddhism. The particular path we have chosen within Buddhism is called Jodo Shinshu. And some of you might be thinking now, well, what about the second noble truth? The second noble truth teaches us to examine the cause of suffering. In the letter that Shinran Shonin wrote, the cause is clearly identified. Bon no gusoku no mi, or by nature, our very existence is possessed of blind passions. Having said this, Shinran Shonin also cautions us not to use this as an excuse to justify acts that should not be committed, words that should not be said, and thoughts that should not be harbored. Because life is suffering, one of the important functions of the temple is to provide us with a place to mourn. It is our safe space to grieve together. It is a safe space for us to be able to console each other. And needless to say, it is always a place to share the Dharma together. In other words, the temple is our place to share the wisdom and compassion of a Buddha. In our case, it is Amida Buddha that allows us to have this safe space, not just to mourn and grieve together, but to celebrate and rejoice with each other as well. We all know how uplifting and celebrating together can be. Unfortunately, we also know how devastating it can be to lose a loved one. In waging war, we are deliberately forcing others to experience this loss. And let's not fool ourselves. War is about killing. It is about inflicting pain. The goal of war is to inflict so much pain, be it physical, mental, verbal, or emotional, that the other side surrenders, if not completely capitulates. Why would we do this? We are very adept at justifying all sorts of actions, even as children. In justifying our acts, we can lose the toy even while it's still in our hands. Unfortunately, with war, as adults, the toy that we are fighting over is the very earth beneath our feet. Whereas two children fighting might be annoying, war is devastating. It is cruel. It is deadly. In the letter of Shinran Shonin that I quoted, the passage that I read ends with, "In people who have long heard the Buddha's name and said the Nembutsu, surely there are signs of rejecting the evil of this world and signs of their desire to cast off the evil in themselves." Jodo Shinshu is now more important than it has ever been. We need to have a teaching, to have a light that can show us how we have changed the toy, our planet, and made it into an object of hatred and anger. More than ever, we need to allow wisdom to help us to understand that instead of play, what we are doing is continuing to consume more alcohol while being completely unaware of how drunk we are. I'm not drunk. You're the one who's drunk. Nuh-uh. You're the drunk. I can handle my liquor. Give it back to me. No, it's my bottle. We continue to drink the alcohol of pride, power, anger, and hatred. And while we fight, we need to have an outside voice. Namo Amida Butsu is constantly calling out to us, asking us, please stop taking poison. The compassion of the Buddha does not flee from us, regardless of how annoying, how cruel, how mean we might become. And it's constantly reminding us that we do not need to continue to hurt ourselves and others. I'm almost up with my time, but I'm sure that some of you, possibly many of you, are disappointed with what I have said so far. You might be disappointed because I doubt that I have provided any answers to the question. What you might be asking is, what can one person do? And that, I think, is the real question. What can one person do? What can I do? What can any of us do? It may not seem that one person can do very much, but please let me remind everyone how much even a newborn can do. When we were born, and if you have children, let me also include when your children were born, the parent knows that the infant has changed the entire world. This fact is especially known by Amida Buddha, and is why the Buddha has vowed to ensure that all of us can and will go to be born in the Pure Land. Unfortunately, we have been fighting from our childhood. It is hard to break bad habits. It is hard to overcome addiction. Fortunately, we haven't just been fighting like the Ashura. In coming to the temple like we have today, we have also been learning how to hear the Dharma and how to receive it. Through hearing, we have also learned how to understand first ourselves and then others. We have learned how to accept, again, first ourselves and then others. We have been learning how to think, how to reflect, and how to share. And when we share, isn't that when the toy becomes a toy again? Sharing the Dharma is important. Sharing the Nembutsu, helping each other to say and hear Namo Amida Butsu is important. Sharing Jodo Shinshu is important. And now, more than ever. Quoting again the end of the passage from Shinran Shoni's letter that I began with, and people who have long heard the Buddha's name and said the Nembutsu, surely there are signs of rejecting the evil of this world and signs of their desire to cast off the evil in themselves. We might still believe that one person cannot do that much. On the other hand, peace has to start here. It has nowhere else it can start from. Given that the title of this seminar has been War in Buddhism, I would like to end by quoting the Dhammapada. This is the same passage that Reverend Dr. Ken Tanaka quoted as well, although I will be quoting from a different translator. This is verse 5, found in the chapter about the pairs, and the translation I'm quoting is from Anando Jauti Bhikkhu, as found in Dhammapada, 2nd edition, published in November of 2017. The quote is, "For not by hatred do hatred cease at any time in this place. They only cease with non-hatred. This truth is surely eternal." Thank you all very, very much for giving me this opportunity to speak at this seminar. Thank you all very, very much for coming and sharing the Dharma as the Shinshu Buddhists together, and hopefully in experiencing what it means to share, we also have experienced what it means to feel joy as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Sensei. Thank you very much. Please join in Gasho, and we will say a few words before meals. We rely upon the source of limitless wisdom and endless life. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu. Thank you all very much.